Hey y'all, Zach McDonald, your real estate agent with Real Property Associates, and this is my Seattle Housing Market Watch for March 26, 2025. Well, we've started spring. Our family headed over to Dairy Queen and got our free ice cream cone last week, and we're right into the thick of the spring housing market here in the Seattle area, and we've been in it for, I would say, probably a month or so. The competition has been picking up, especially in the median and average price points. We're seeing the higher price points not necessarily flying off the shelf as much, and same thing with the condo market. And as I'm looking at the interest rates, again, this is one of the big pieces of the puzzle here over the past few years. We've seen interest rates still remaining about the same. So 6.8% here this week on Mortgage News Daily's survey. And last week we're at 6.81. So not much of a change here with the mortgage rates. And as we're considering, what are some of the things that are causing the housing market to act how it is, the first thing we're looking at is what's the supply and demand, right? That's a huge piece of the puzzle. And when we consider the demand in the Seattle area, one of the key pieces of the puzzle is the interest rates. The interest rates have been higher than they were for the last few years now, and people have certainly adjusted to the higher rates. But the rates are still higher, so we're not seeing maybe as much activity as there would be. There's plenty of people that would love to move or buy something different that are not going to because of the mortgages that they currently have. They're great rates, and they also are in a really low payment in comparison to what their payment would be, right? So there's that piece. There's also the supply piece, and the supply side of the equation is affected in some similar ways because there would be people that would be selling houses that others would like to buy, but they're not selling them. Whether they bought something else or not, there are less people selling right now because they're holding on to those great mortgages. Maybe they're keeping the house as a rental. In other cases, they're selling that house if they buy the next one, but they are not buying the next one. So therefore, they're staying put and not selling. So you have the supply piece, less people that are selling, and you also have the demand piece, less people that are buying. And over the past few years, those numbers have remained relatively consistent, right? We haven't seen the housing prices skyrocket, and we also haven't seen them plummet. We saw them initially plummet during the 2022 kind of rapid rise in interest rates, and we also saw them bounce back fairly quickly. But they've been in this still kind of trying to get that last little bit of bounce back in some places, and in other places they've even surpassed their previous highs. But so far, right, houses haven't really jumped too much beyond where they were. Now, as we consider what's going on right now in the housing market, I mentioned already that we're seeing more competition in King County and Snohomish County, and generally the Seattle area. And one of the things that we've been talking about here over the past few weeks are the weekly pending stats. And so we're getting an even better look at what the competition actually looks like. And before we do that, I want to briefly go over our inventory report, if we want to call it, the housing market watch, which is what we've been doing in these videos for quite a while, and just look at what's coming on the market, what's coming off the market. So as we're looking at new listings, 667 last week, up a little bit from the previous week at 621. We saw more price reductions this week as well, 290 price reductions versus 218 the prior week. And again, this market watch is a combination of King and Snohomish County single family data for those that are new. And then we'll look at specific data for King and Snohomish County here shortly. But what we're seeing is a little bit more inventory coming on the market, and we're seeing that some of that inventory is not selling right away with multiple offers, right? And in fact, we'll talk about this, but more than half of the houses in King and Snohomish County are selling without multiple offers, right? So multiple offers are common, but not as common as selling without multiple offers. And in a lot of cases, those houses might sell for the asking price or a little bit less. And that's where you're seeing those price reductions. Now, contingent purchases, we had 19 over the past week in King and Snohomish County. That's not a huge number, but that does mean that there are opportunities to sell your house that you're currently living in, buy concurrently, which is a lot easier than trying to sell and then buy, or buy and have two mortgages and then sell. So there's a possibility of that. Now, the odds of it, especially in the more competitive places in King and Snohomish County, are slim, and especially for a house that everybody else might be interested in, right? So those hot houses that pop up on Redfin, those are houses that are most likely not taking contingent offers. So you're better off if you really want to get the house you want, and you'll put your best foot forward essentially to do that without the contingent purchase. And if we look at the pending listings, we're seeing similar numbers to last week, just a little bit less, 789 versus 813. So pretty similar pending activity. The sold activity is picking up, 557 versus 486. A lot of that is, hey, we're at the end of the month, right? And so as we near the end of the month, we're going to have more closings happening. But overall, the activity is remaining fairly similar in King and Snohomish County. Now let's look at King County specifically. All right. What is going on with the market activity? Now we're going to see the published data at the end of the month, but right now we have a week snapshot of the unpublished MLS data, which is really helpful as an insight to what's going on in the market. So for those that have been following along, I hope, and go ahead and let me know in the comments if this has been helpful to add into these videos. Now, looking at King County, we're seeing the last week, the median sales price was $1 million. So $1 million median sales price in King County last week. And on average, houses selling 2% over asking. Right? And last week we were at 1% over asking, and the median sales price was $935. And we don't want to say, oh, that just means houses are that much more valuable all of a sudden, right? These are just week over week numbers. And then each month, these numbers get put together. But at this point, we're just seeing some more expensive houses selling, most likely. But the competition there, 2% over asking price versus 1% over asking price. Cool. That's showing us that there's a little bit more competition, and that's reflected in probably more aggressive offers for specific houses. Because if we look at the number of pending sales with multiple offers, that number is actually lower, barely. 40% of houses in King County last week sold with multiple offers, whereas it was 41% the week before. But interestingly, people are getting more aggressive for those houses. So the percentage of multiple offers was a tiny bit lower, but there were fewer houses with an inspection contingency. There were 30% of houses with inspection contingencies versus 32% the week prior. And we also saw fewer financing addendums in King County, 58% this week versus 59% last week. So even though there were fewer multiple offers, the offers that did come in were just a little bit more aggressive, and they could have been a little bit flavored by losing out on something the week before or a few weeks before. And the pendings with escalations also increased. 20% had an escalation addendum versus 19 the week before. So I think that supports just a moderate uptick in the aggressiveness in the offers, not necessarily, again, more multiple offers, but people are feeling that a little bit after taking a couple punches, wanting to punch back, so to speak. Now, Snohomish County, what are we looking at in Snohomish County? Slightly down on median sales price, week over week, $774,990 was the median sales price last week in Snohomish County, down from $818,275. Again, modest, but a little bit less. The amount over asking price, 1%, which was exactly the same as last week. So not much of a change there. There was an uptick in the multiple offers in Snohomish County. 43% versus 42% last week of all sales or pending sales in Snohomish County had multiple offers. We talked about this before, but less than 50% of all the sales are experiencing multiple offers, but it's a pretty hefty percentage, 43%. If we look at the pendings with the inspection addendum, interestingly, although it got more aggressive in King County, it actually got less aggressive in Snohomish County. So there were more multiple offer scenarios, but fewer were as aggressive. So we had 38% of offers with an inspection addendum. Last week, only 28% in Snohomish County. So a little less aggressive with the inspection negotiation. And if we look at the financing situation, we had 66% with a financing addendum last week, 75% this week. So either we have a new crop of buyers that hasn't experienced the competition yet. Maybe they haven't lost out, but at the same time, the offers that are being accepted have these terms. So my guess is that some of the more aggressive buyers were the previous week, right? They're out of the picture. And now sellers are picking from buyers that are remaining from that pool and wanted to have some of these contingencies. So we're seeing an uptick, 66% to 75% with the financing addendum, right? And 38% versus 28% with inspection addendums, which for a buyer, that's amazing. That's what you want to hear. You want to hear that it's a little less competitive, that you have a better chance while also protecting yourself. And when you look at the escalation addendums, that's where people were more aggressive. 17% included one versus 14% last week. So it seemed like price was winning out more than the contingencies. And in some cases, when it's really competitive, you have both. But it seems to be a little less competitive in Snohomish County over the past week, just looking at some of this information. Now, again, there were still the multiple offers, so the demand's there, but the buyers weren't as aggressive as they were last week and even in previous weeks. So overall, we're seeing healthy competition this spring in King and Snohomish County. We're not seeing any type of slowdown yet. I would say that we're still in the middle of one of the most competitive, probably the most competitive time of 2025. That is, unless we start to see some changes with policy or rates start coming down that would maybe influence buyers to enter the market, in which case we would see a lot more competition, which we were seeing before in 2022. And I would just continue to reiterate that we didn't lose all those people in 2022. They didn't all move away. A lot of those people are still here and would buy houses, but they just haven't yet, or maybe they have been buying more slowly. But I would bet that we would have a lot more buyers entering the market with even 5.5% interest rates than what we're seeing right now, and probably more listings too, a lot more movement in real estate. But at this point, we're not expecting to see that low of interest rates, maybe 6% at some point this year. But a lot is still riding on how all the policy changes shake out and what's happening with the mortgage rate. So if you have questions about your situation, if you've been thinking about buying or selling a house in King or Snohomish County, the greater Seattle area, I'd love to be a resource for you. And I'm always happy to chat about the housing market.